Hi everyone, this is Miriam Wortel, author of the book Lessons in Law of Attraction. And today we're talking about manifestation, law of attraction, and the Garden of Eden, and also like what this world represents. And we learn right from the beginning of creation that contrast is a necessary part of things. The first things that were ever created were light and dark. We therefore see that sometimes contrast, like going through rougher things, is a necessary part of the process of life and shouldn't always be looked at as a bad thing. I don't know how many times I went through something negative and I affirmed that through it something positive was going to come, was leading me to something positive. And I affirm that anytime I go through anything, especially something that's triggering, I affirm that it leads me to something really, really wonderful. And I kid you not, every single time it does, because I made that a part of my belief system. And I recommend everyone else does the same, because it's really changed my life implementing that. So when I started learning about law of attraction and manifestation, I thought that I was like, this must be what the Garden of Eden must have been like, you know, where they wanted food and all of a sudden something like a tomato or something would just like sprout from the ground. That because they were in that place of feeling good, knowing their worth, just being right there with God, they were like totally aligned with God, that everything they wanted was just right there, right? And we see that after Adam and Eve do something that they're not supposed to do, they were essentially exiled from that. And I kind of have this theory that we kicked ourselves out rather than God kicking us out. More so because, like, well, I mean, God knew what was going to happen, obviously. God knew what would happen. But in other words, I feel that what kicked us out was our natural reaction and realization in front of God of, like, we knew we did something wrong. When I say we, because we all stemmed from them. And a lot of things that keep us away from the things that we want in life is a feeling of shame, guilt, humiliation, feeling insignificant, a lack of confidence. It's always some kind of lack or negative outlook, something of that nature. And when I think about people that I know that have had really, if you want to call them charmed lives, they were people who naturally had a lot of confidence, felt really secure, had a great relationship with God in whatever form. Not everyone has to be religious. But what I'm saying is they weren't there holding a space of anger or resentment towards God. You know, there are people that I know that have had wonderful lives that weren't religious at all. But because they weren't holding around a negative feeling towards God, because I know lots of religious people who still hold negative feelings towards God and therefore manifest negative things, because whatever things we're holding on, like, you know, we're a vessel of energy. So whatever is going on inside our vessel, we're going to see manifestations of that, and it's going to keep appearing and appearing and appearing and appearing until we you know, heal these things. Life is a mirror, and that should probably be one of my upcoming you know, episodes of talking about this. But, you know, every single thing in life is a mirror, you know, and I'm saying this continuously. I say this in my book, and I say this anytime I'm like speaking to someone, teaching something, and certainly these episodes is a really important topic to bring up, that we're always getting a mirror, right? So if we don't like something in our lives, we can always just, you know, thank God for the mirror. This is, by the way, why everything in our life is good, right? It's because every single thing is giving us awareness. It's not that, like, we go through something negative. Yes, from something negative, you can always pull out something positive, but just the mere fact that it's giving us awareness is something that makes it positive. So we can always thank God that He's letting people mirror. And usually the people closest in our lives are going to be like our biggest mirror. So it could be your parents, your spouse, your siblings, your kids, your best friends, potentially your coworkers, your boss. You know, the people closest in your life and closest proximity to you, and especially the people that mean the most to you, are going to be reflections of your innermost thoughts and beliefs. In fact, you know, to a certain extent, when we look at each other's lives, we're sort of seeing into each other's subconscious minds, because we're always getting a manifestation of that. And, you know, our goal is to have as much love as possible in our vessel, that we're supposed to be overflowing with love. And because, you know, we're a part of God, you know, we're souls in bodies. Our souls are a part of God, a literal part, a spark of God. And God is whole, God is complete, God is love. And every time we're not in that state, by default, we're kind of manifesting something that is, you know, kind of unwanted, right? But that unwanted thing is for us to notice, work through, and get back to our true state of being. I feel like I'm saying something that I feel like the world really needs to hear right now. I feel like the world that we're in, everyone's pointing fingers at someone else and saying, well, this bad thing's happening in the world because, you know, you're not living up to code, or you're doing this thing and you're doing this thing and you're doing this thing. And for me to understand, like, you know, I learned this from Abraham Hicks. So for me, you know, growing up and living by, and still living by, you know, a Jewish philosophy, and understanding like kind of all the different greats we've had in our life and taking a little bit of everything, it was really interesting for me that some of the greatest lessons I learned came from secular sources, but it also reinforced a lot of the stuff that I learned Jewishly. It actually helped bring a lot of clarity just because things were said maybe in a more simple form. And when I've heard Abraham Hicks talk about the fact that you cannot experience something that you're not a vibrational match to, that shows us that if we are experiencing anything in our lives, we literally have no right to blame any other person, because somehow in some way we were aligned with that experience, which means we have some responsibility that we held at least some part of some negative emotion that we experienced that. And that's when we have to really look within ourselves. And it's not to be harsh on ourselves, because honestly, the harder on ourselves we are, the worse that is. In fact, when we're hard on ourselves, we only manifest more situations like that. You know, self-blame and self-doubt, like it's just going to snowball every single thing. Like, you know, it's the same thing. It's like if you're having an issue with money, because money is probably the most talked about topics in law of attraction. You know, you might feel just a little short one day. You're like, oh, whatever, things might feel a little tight. And then if you focus on that feeling, you could really end up in a negative situation. Whereas like you could only have $20 to your name, but if you feel really great about the $20 you have to your name, you can end up manifesting a lot of money. You could win the lottery the next day just by focusing on those feelings. And whatever we are thinking about, we're always attracting more of whatever we're thinking about, positive or negative. And our emotions, I know I'm saying like a lot of deep stuff, but I want people to understand this, and people may need to listen to this over and over again to understand this. Our emotions are just an indicator of what we're thinking. So if we're happy, that means the thoughts that we're thinking are in line with our desires and that we're on the right track. If we're thinking a negative feeling, that means that, you know, our soul is like really rooted in our desires. Like, we're talking about our like true soul desires here. We're not talking about like stupid things, but even for stupid things, like you'll feel that tug if you're thinking in opposition to it. But especially for the important things in life, you'll feel a negative emotion because, and this is something else I learned from Abraham Hicks, that like you're in disagreement basically with your, if we call it your highest self, your soul, whatever's the true you, the part of you that is truth, the part of you that comes from God, that knows the truth about the circumstance. Anytime you're thinking something negative, that's just letting you know, hey, you're thinking some thoughts that you really shouldn't be thinking right now. So, you know, instead of getting upset at ourselves, and like that's something I personally struggled with a lot, like a lot. That was just a huge issue I had to work through, to put it nicely. You know, we just acknowledge like, hey, we're not thinking this thought. We want to just do our best to reach for a better thought. And we can only reach for thoughts that are within our range. Like if someone's in a place of despair, they can't think of like the most joyous thought, but they can think of a thought that's just like a little less painful and kind of gradually walk their way into a better place. And so when I'm talking about the Garden of Eden, you know, that's a feeling of being in total alignment, aligning with the truth of who we are, aligning with God, being our truest selves, being in that confident, good feeling place. That is our goal, to get to that good feeling place and to feel that love in our hearts. I feel like a lot of the world has been living in a fear-based place. That's something that I saw in the world, and therefore something within myself that I not only see, but I'm working on. That a lot of times, because I know like for me religiously, like a lot of times I had become one of those, like I had become kind of compulsive with my religious practice, because I kept feeling like I had to like do all these things and say all these psalms and prayers and do certain things in order to change things in my life. And the more I prayed and I was just like, what's going on? I didn't understand. I'm not saying the prayers didn't work. Like, it definitely helped, but there was a point that it did get worse. But things getting worse actually led to things getting better, because God kept just kind of giving me a stronger mirror of the beliefs until things had gotten so bad in my life, not once, but twice. It was kind of like a big boom, but that boom kind of like knocked me down. And when I got to that place, I was suddenly kind of like starting over and reframing things. And that caused me to learn what's known as law of attraction. And I suddenly, through that, had an understanding. This is why I was going through things. It's like, in other words, I wasn't going through something tough in my life because I wasn't praying hard enough. I was going through something tough in my life because I was holding perspectives that were against my desires, perspectives about other people and myself and circumstances in life that didn't suit me. And all I was getting was a mirror. And I feel like it was through that prayer that God guided me even more. And one of the biggest things that has changed my life is taking on this practice of talking to God every day. And I think people have to be ready for that. And there are a lot of people who have a practice to talk to God for an hour a day. For me personally, that's too much. There's only been a handful of days that I've talked to God for that long. Honestly, 10 to 20 minutes, just starting your day off like that is really a big deal. And I would ask God a lot of questions. And I found, especially if I answer like simple questions, I would get like simple answers, and I would find it, I would be led to like a YouTube video or a book, or someone would say something to me, and somehow throughout the course of my day, like as soon as I relax, because, and I learned this from Abraham Hicks too, the vibration, like meaning the energy of the question and the answer are two totally different things. So when you're asking the question, you're not going to get that answer right in that moment unless you can calm yourself down right after asking it. So you actually, when you calm down, you'll receive the answer. So I trust that when I ask, I'm going to receive the answer to a question. Obviously, if you ask a complex question, you may have resistance. Resistance is like negative energy. Like you might be like, oh my God, I'm probably not going to answer that. It's probably not the answer that I want. If you're feeling like that, you're not going to be able to hear that answer. So you want to ask a question that you feel like you're able to hear the answer to, something like really soft and simple. And so I would just talk to God, and I would ask questions, and I would get more and more clarity. And that's how I learned what I learned, and why I'm able to do this and share with you all that I've learned, because I've been now doing this for over a year, and I've been watching my life change. And even still, like, I've had ups and downs. I had a lot of subconscious programming I had to work through. I had a lot of depression I had to work through, because I was sort of shocked at the amount of negative perceptions that I held. One of the things that I keep saying to people, and like I said it earlier, you don't want to beat yourself up, and sometimes it just felt like, oh my God, it felt so daunting, it felt so hard. I mean, look, the older you are, the more stuff you're going to have in your bag, right? Everyone has their baggage. So obviously, like, there are some people that have more baggage than others, and it's okay. But also, the more stuff that you've worked through, you also have appreciation every single time you take an item out of your bag, right? So every time you release that, you feel so much better. You have a different appreciation. So just because, you have a harder journey than someone else, or it seems that way, don't feel discouraged, because I feel like I had a much harder life. I'm only in my early 30s, and I feel like I had a much harder life than a lot of people that I know. But I also feel like that gave me a big gift, because look how many people I get to help. And even just in the process of watching my own life unfold. But I feel like I have this clarity now, because I understand, like, that life is a gift, right? Like, I'm understanding, like, a lot of times we think that, this life is supposed to be a life of struggle and whatever else, and everything's about getting to the best of the afterlife. And I really feel like it's both. Yes, this world is like a sort of staging area, so to speak, for the afterlife, but also when we realize this world is a gift, this world is supposed to be, I feel like, our Garden of Eden, and we can make it like that as best as we can. I mean, when we change our perceptions to be as close as we can to the perceptions that God holds, and really looking at everything in a positive, and obviously that doesn't happen overnight. And so there's a lot of people who, like, they fake positive, like, I'm saying, like I have a good, feeling about this, but like, like, oh, I'm feeling positive about this, but like deep down they're feeling like all kinds of like tension. Like, you can tell, like, there's always those people that think they're positive, but they're not really truly being honest with themselves. And like, I tell people, like, it's okay to say, like, something sucks. Like, totally. Like, just say, if something's bad going on in your life, like, it's okay to say something's awful. Like, it's okay to acknowledge it, because you release resistance when you're being honest with yourself. Like, sometimes I'll tell God, like, I've woken up and I've said like to God, like, I don't feel like speaking to you today. Like, I just don't. And sometimes when I do that, that's like the best sessions that I have, because I'm releasing that resistance. I'm being honest. And I was like, whoo, that felt good to get off my chest. Right. And it allows me to actually be in a better place and then start to work past a lot of the issues that I've previously held. And, you know, right now I'm in the process of working on my second book. As I said, my first book, Lessons in Law of Attraction, it's available on Amazon and a handful of other places. I wanted to give people the starting tools to be able to fix their own life and understand that, yes, there's a lot of tools out there, but, you know, law of attraction is not about, you know, manifesting these fancy cars or super nice homes. I mean, you can totally use it for that. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's really about understanding life is a mirror and just improving your like daily quality of life. I feel like that's what people want more anyway. You know, we're all looking for a better quality life. And, you know, and getting there, you know, the way we do that is actually by not focusing on the lack. It's by focusing on, you know, the positive aspects, but not like forcing ourselves to do that. Like, if you're really feeling in a bad place, like, acknowledge that you're in a bad place. Because if you're in a bad place and you try to like make a gratitude list and you're really feeling bad, like, literally you could actually make yourself feel worse. So if you're really in a bad place, like, give yourself that moment to say, okay, I'm in the bad place. Like, but acknowledge and say, you know, this world is supposed to be like, this world is a gift for us. God wants us to have our deepest desires. And obviously, at the same time, like, I think it's really important, extraordinarily important, to recognize what's God's deepest desire. Like, you know, God gave us this world with unconditional love and the ability to manifest whatever we want. But I feel like it's also really important to give God that unconditional love back. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's God's deepest desires, for us to have a close relationship with him. And he gives us the free will whether we want to, you know, do that or not. So, you know, one of the things, like, I know that's been really disheartening for me is I feel like there's a lot of people on YouTube that talk about law of attraction, and it's all about, like, it's like, give me, gimme, gimme, like that kind of a thing. And I'm kind of like, well, what about having a relationship with God and thanking, you know, God who's giving you these things, who gave you, who made you the vessel that you are to receive these things. And I feel like for people who recognize that they have this special light, you can see, you know, who has that light. Some people are just beaming and just recognizing, you know, God in this process. And, you know, God's okay no matter what. Like, God's always going to give, because that's who God is. You know, that God is the epitome of unconditional love. But I feel like if we're really in that place, then we're going to want to give back. And that gets back to the being in a place of love versus fear thing. In other words, the reason we observe God's commandments, it shouldn't be out of fear of punishment. And we shouldn't be praying out of fear of punishment and doing all these things out of fear of like negative things, or to stop negative things from happening. We should really, when we tap into who we truly are, and when we're in that place of love, then suddenly we want to do these things out of love. You know, if we're doing things out of fear, then we've completely, in my opinion, disconnected from who we are. The fear should be a fear of not recognizing our true potential, and not recognizing that life is a gift, and not recognizing that, you know, like, to me, it's a very scary thing to be in a place of realizing that God isn't on your side. And there was a point in my life that, I kid you not, I was like, I literally was wondering if God hated me. Like, I really was like in such a low point some years ago. And honestly, it's through the worst things that happened in my life that I realized, I was like, nope, this world was actually supposed to be the Garden of Eden. I just was misdirected in my thoughts. And, you know, my hope is that I can help guide a lot of people to get to a better place. And the story that I share, unlike a lot of other people, like, you know, I had a lot of rough things happen to me, and my goal is to help other people who have really, really struggled. Like, I'm not trying to tell people like, oh, you know, I had a really good life, my life got a little bit better. There's a lot of people who just already had a good life and manifested a better life. I'm here to help the people that couldn't necessarily afford the coaching or the right help, the people that felt like no one's going to be there for them or listen to them, because I know what it feels like when you are reaching for help and you feel like there's no one there to help you, and you just have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because that's what I had to do. So I have an extra place in my heart for people who can't necessarily afford, you know, those resources, or like, you know, coaching, or because law of attraction coaching, by the way, for anyone who's wondering, ranges usually between $250 and $500 a session. So it's not cheap. And that's why I personally, like, I don't do coaching. I wrote the book to help people. I'm creating Riz's just to help people, like, you know, my YouTube videos and I'm using this as YouTube and podcast. Like, you know, this is just to help people. This is strictly just to help people because I want people to have this information for free. Because not everyone can afford that. You know, you have to learn first how to manifest money before you can pay for the coaching. Like, isn't that crazy, right? You're like, I was like, how can you, you know, otherwise you're scraping up your money together to try and get enough coaching to manifest money to pay for the coaching you just paid for. Like, to me, that's ridiculous. Come on. So what I'm trying to leave everyone with is, look, life is a gift. We're supposed to have wonderful lives. It's not about accepting our lives as being terrible, okay? I want to get that out of your head. Your life is not supposed to be terrible. If God is putting a challenge in your life, it's really that you're putting the challenge in your life. God co-creates with you, okay? So you created the challenge of your life. God co-created with you, which means he put something in that challenge to help you redeem you from it. But the goal of that challenge is to actually get you to figure out the root of it, to clear it so you can live the most wonderful life. That is how this world is meant to be. So thank you for coming on the journey with me, because this world is becoming a better place. I can see it, I can feel it, because that's the channel that I'm tuned to. I see the world getting a better place. You know, whatever you tune in is what you're going to see more of. So I'm choosing to see all the good in the world and all the epiphanies happening, all the positive awakening and the love that's coming, and people coming together and people revamping and shifting from a fear state to a love state. So please join me on that journey, because this world is becoming a better place, and I have faith that things are getting better. Hope everyone's doing well. Take care.